right, welcome back to the Now Morning Show here on TTT. It's just about 23 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. And we do have on Zoom with us this morning Dr. Aracilla Joseph, who is the director of the U.S. Seismic Research Center. And we're just here to talk about what's happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with the eruption of the La Soufriere volcano. Good morning to you, Dr. Joseph.
Good morning, Ms. Legault, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here this morning. So let's just start with, we know that the volcano is erupting, and the last time I spoke with you, this is something that I think it's always important for people to learn, are the different kind of volcanic eruptions that we may have.
Yes, so essentially there are two major types. The effusive, which means a gentle flow of magma out of a conduit or vent. And then the opposite of that is the explosive, which is, of course, more violent with ash columns and pyroclastic density currents associated with it. Unfortunately, with La Soufriere volcano, this volcano shows both types of eruption. Generated a very huge ash column. It had a Pelian-style activity, and it generated pyroclastic density currents. So with respect to what happens with an explosive event or an explosive eruption, you would have, as I said before, an ash column generated, meaning material incorporated in gas is spewed high up into the air, and this could get caught up by upper and lower level winds and transported in different directions. There can be what I call pyroclastic density currents, and this is material, hot ash and gas, that travels down the flanks of the valley, typically channeled down the volcano, typically channeled in valleys. We have, of course, ashfall ballistics, meaning big blocks being strewn, far away from the vent. These are some of the hazards associated with explosions.
Talk to us about the hot ash and gas, Dr. Joseph. Are these dangerous to the health of the people who are around in St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
So the hot gas and ash that I mentioned are associated with pyroclastic density currents. And these are very fast-moving flows on the sides of the volcano. So nothing in its path survives. This is, could be up to 1,000 degrees Celsius or more, so that, nothing survives. But the long-term impact of the ash that's being deposited over St. Vincent and some of the other islands, particularly Barbados. So there are health implications in terms of long-term exposure, but it's all a matter of the finest components that is breathable and what gets into the lungs.
Right. So,
but of course, I'm so sorry, Natalie, but there's a lot more, complications, not just the health,
right?
Not just health considerations with respect to the hazards of the ash.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I do have a friend who lives in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who will be sharing her personal experience with us later in the program. And I do know when I spoke with her yesterday, she suggested that they were out of electricity and water. Is this directly correlated with the volcanic eruption, or just precautionary measures to ensure that nothing gets into the stream and to protect people's lives?
Okay, so it's twofold. Yes, the electricity is affected because the ash accumulates on the power lines and so on, can weigh down and cause corrosion, and and we've seen that happening. I think posts have been shared on social media that shows some of the electrical lines starting to catch fire. So that can bring down your power grid. And then the second thing that you mentioned was the water supply. Yes, the ash contaminates the water supplies. So twofold for the contamination, as well as to protect the infrastructure of the water system, the pumps and all of that. The water authorities in St. Vincent would shut down the system to preserve the equipment as well.
Right. So between the effusive eruption that started in December and the explosive eruption that's going, about a week now?
No, it started on Friday.
Oh, it's Friday it started.
Yeah.
Well, forgive me. I was kind of
Yeah.
really out of it for a few days. All right, so Friday,
So
now we're
it's
at
3 days.
Monday. Yeah,
Yeah.
but in terms of that, in terms of the how long, is there any indicators as to how long this may continue?
No, Natalie, this can go on for days to weeks, possibly.
So at this point, we just don't know.
No.
Right. So then what can people do in the meantime to safeguard themselves?
Well, the people who were at most risk were the people in the red and orange zone, and they have now been evacuated. And anybody remaining in those zones, they really need to get out and find themselves shelters and safe areas in the green zone. And when I say safe areas, I mean safe areas from the direct impacts of the explosions and the activities. Yes, they will still be affected by the ash, but they would be out of the range of the flows and the ballistics and the other main hazards that could cause loss of life.
I know that there was
So
some rain yesterday in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Does this help with the diffusion of the ash, or does it just like cement it onto things?
depending on the amount of rainfall, and of course the thickness of the ash, particularly in the red and the orange zones, this can actually lead to more problems because, as you rightly said, it can turn the ash uh, that's on buildings and roofs and so on into more of a cement-like kind of consistency and weigh it down and cause damage to roofs and other infrastructure. But a light amount of rainfall in areas with less ash could help to clear the ash. But with the type of ash fall in St. Vincent, the rain isn't really going to help.
Right. And in the red and orange zones, do we have any measurements as to how much ash are in these areas?
Yes, our team went out yesterday. Forgive me, but it was shared in one of our advisories. At the time, it was a few. Okay, so I can give you the general pattern, but I can't
Yeah,
give you the
that's
exact numbers off the
that's
top of my head.
that's fine.
So, and I think it's expected. Most people would expect that from the south of the island to the north, the thickness of the ash increased. So I think it's probably safe to say a couple inches towards the or more towards the, because what is happening is that, remember, it's been repeated explosions with ash fall, and it's ash layers piling on top of ash layers, so it's getting thicker and thicker. So it's several inches right now in the red and possibly orange zones.
Right. I would imagine that that has to be difficult. But Dr. Joseph, talk to us about, the crater itself. Is there any compromise to its structure as a result of the explosive activity?
So we received around just after 5, we received some satellite imagery. Some satellite imagery was shared yesterday already on social media platforms that showed the effusive dome that had built up between the end of 2020 and 2021 was completely gone, and within the old 1979 dome, the bulk of that dome was also gone, and in its place was a deep crater vent. So this is the location of the new vent through which all of this activity is happening. And this morning, just after 5, we received some additional satellite imagery, which indicated that from the eruption that took place just after 4 this morning, there are signs of pyroclastic density currents causing, scouring the valleys towards the south, the west, the west, the southwest, and the south flanks of the volcano towards the Walibu area.
If this continues, Dr. Joseph, do you think it is a possibility that it could get to the point where all Vincentians and people from the Grenadines will have to be evacuated?
Now, they won't have to be evacuated based on, as I said before, the risk, direct risk of the explosive activity. It's the ash, the amount of ash that's being generated that will be making things uncomfortable. So no, not necessarily the whole island, because remember, I mean, there is a green and the yellow zones where that's outside of the direct impacts of the
Yeah.
explosions, but the amount of ash is something that they would have to take measures to try to keep clearing on a regular basis to avoid it becoming too uncomfortable.
Right. And in terms of, I know that the red and orange zones have several inches of ash, but what about the green and yellow? Are they too? Do they have ash right across the island?
Yes, ash is right across the island.
I can't even imagine how the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines are dealing with this. I mean, for a lot of them, it might be, a new based on their age, having to experience this. Is like us and, the
Yeah.
2019 the COVID-19 pandemic, having to treat as something completely new. But, Doc, I'm here and I'm sitting and I'm thinking about it with all that is happening. How has the other islands been impacted? We've heard about Barbados, that I think is east. Is it east of St. Vincent and the
Yes, that's
Grenadines?
correct.
Right.
Mhm.
How has that been? How has that island been particularly impacted by the volcanic eruptions?
So unfortunately, Barbados has been extremely negatively impacted by the ash being transported by the upper trade wind, the upper winds, taking a lot of the ash directly onto Barbados. There is some ash that's reaching to St. Vincent and some to Grenada, but predominantly Barbados has really seen the worst of it in terms of the impacts on other islands, neighboring islands.
And if it continues, can we anticipate that other islands will be affected as well?
It all depends on the level of the winds and the direction of the winds,
Yeah.
but nowhere near what Barbados is being impacted by. These would be very light would be light ashfall in comparison to what's happening with Barbados.
And one of the things I am particularly curious about is the topography of the land. How do volcanoes affect that?
Well, volcanoes are mountains, so they are mountainous features. So in terms of topography, this is what makes most of the islands of the Lesser Antilles, rugged and most of the times it's associated with good things. People hike and enjoy, the trails and so on. So I'm not quite sure, um, what exactly you mean
No,
by
I
the
was just
question.
trying to figure if, when we have volcanic activity, then we, I guess, depending on what it is, I was wondering if even by satellite imagery, if you'd see a difference in the outlay of the land based on what's happening.
Well, not the land itself, but yes, the areas, the volcano and the areas around it, which I just described when I spoke about the satellite imagery showing the scarring of the valleys due to the pyroclastic flows and a change in what the summit looks like now, with
Right.
no old dome. I mean, the old dome literally being
Gone.
destroyed. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely some changes there. But, you know, long term long-term effects volcanoes, 1979 to now, that's what, 42 years?
Yes. Mhm.
42 years. Whenever this stops, I mean, are there normally any indicators about how often we can have these explosive eruptions?
No. We look at the only thing that we can look at as a guide to how the volcano any volcano is behaving is using the monitoring tools. And this is seismicity, ground deformation, and the gas monitoring. And these are things that the Seismic Research Center does throughout the English-speaking islands of the Lesser Antilles for the territories that we provide services to. So volcanoes show unrest periodically, meaning that we would see earthquake swarms associated with them, but that doesn't necessarily, not every earthquake swarm leads to an eruption. It does show signs that the volcano is active and can erupt.
Right.
When things start to escalate, such as it did in St. Vincent, um, Montserrat, etc. This is and Kikamjani. We start to see changes, different changes in the signals associated with that, the seismicity and other signals, gas and deformation. And then these things are relayed to the authorities, depending on if it escalates towards a point that we believe that it's signaling precursory information with respect to explosions or
So there can be a
eruption.
correlation between earthquakes and volcanic activity.
Yes, but volcanic earthquakes, not
Right.
tectonic earthquakes. Because
Okay.
remember, we live in a tectonic setting, subduction zone setting, and we often get large earthquakes or moderate sized earthquakes throughout the year. And this is different from volcanic earthquakes. So the earthquakes that most of us feel
Yeah. Are tectonic.
by due to the tectonic plate movements in the Caribbean, not volcanic earthquakes.
So what exactly causes volcanic earthquakes?
So I'm also looking at the time, Natalie. Um,
We only
the
have 2 minutes. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So quickly, volcanic earthquakes
Yeah.
so they're VT earthquakes or volcanotectonic earthquakes. These are associated with magma, fresh magma from a depth, trying to find a pathway. So it breaks up the rock, the rocks above it, and that generates a certain type of signal that we call volcanotectonic earthquakes. When a fluid pathway, is formed, and by fluid I mean the magma and the gases associated with the material, then that gives a different type of signal that we call long period earthquakes. So we
Right.
see that change. Especially seismologists and volcanoseismologists recognize those signals. And
You,
then we have, go ahead.
no, I know your time is sensitive, but I just wanted to ask. I know that there were considerations and people were feeling anxious about the mud volcano right here in Trinidad and Tobago. So I just wanted to know if there's anything for people to be concerned about at all where that is concerned.
No, the mud volcanoes that we have here is nothing like a real magmatic system. Yes, it's associated with explosions, mud explosions, but not anything the kind of scale that's happening in St. Vincent, and it's totally unrelated to the volcanic
Yeah.
systems throughout the region.
All right, final words before we go, Dr. Joseph.
Um, I think everybody, particularly St. Vincent and the other neighboring islands in the region, need to prepare themselves for continued activity. We cannot say how long this will go on for. Unfortunately, the ash, uh, um, affecting neighboring islands is something that they would have to continually deal with and find a method, a mechanism by which to help, regularly clear it. But more so the St. Vincent itself, they require a lot of help.
Yeah.
And to please keep informed through the official sources of information, because and that is key, because people are sharing misinformation and that's detracting from the work that we do, because then we have to go and, put
Yeah,
out releases and
undo. Yeah.
address these
So you
misinformation.
spend time dealing with the misinformation as compared to concentrating on the work that you need to
That
do.
is exactly right,
Yeah.
Natalie.
Dr. Joseph, we want to thank you so much for being a part of the Now Morning Show and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. We definitely appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Natalie.
You're most welcome, Dr. Aracilla Joseph, Director of the U.S. Seismic Research Center. And she says we don't know when this is going to stop. We just have to wait, but prepare yourselves, do what you can to safeguard yourselves and help the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We're going to take a break and we'll be back with you.